Welcome, I'm the Deadwood Jedi. This is going to be another Raid Shadow Legends video, and today we are on the account of Valkyrie. If you may know this, maybe you don't, but I do offer account services through my website, and Valkyrie came to me asking for improvement with his clan boss team. He was doing about 2 key, maybe a 1 key on Ultra Nightmare, depending on affinity, and he was really hoping to be able to start moving into Ultra Nightmare, and he was hoping anywhere between a 4 and a 2 key Ultra Nightmare team. Well, of course, you know, we went that extra mile and got that 2 key team working. But the reason why I wanted to show this video in particular is because we're going to be using Valkyrie with 2 4-3 ratio champions, and I have it speed tuned, so whether we're facing Void or we're facing Affinity, it will still be in sync. We will still be covered, and we're going to get very similar results independent of that. Now, obviously, he has some really good champions, and I was able to find enough gear to gear it out pretty darn good, I would say. It's probably, there's room for improvement here. I would think that's a pretty safe bet to say, and I don't think there's a lot of room to really push this to like a 1 key team, but there's always some room there, right? Depending on the champions you have, depending on the gear you can bring, there's always ways to improve the results that you're getting, and I think this is going to be a pretty good one. Now, when you're speed tuning Valkyrie, she has a passive ability that's going to make it really hard to speed tune. That's why this is such a special comp and one that is really unique. So I will put this on the website, so if you're wondering how this comp works, make sure to go check that out and you'll be able to see exactly what I'm doing here. But let's go ahead, let's look at the champions so we can figure out exactly what we're doing. And of course, if you guys haven't already, please take the time, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell to help support this channel. And if you like today's music, we do have that Soundstripe link down below in the pinned comment and description of this video. So these are going to be the champions we're using, right? We've got Sepulchre Sentinel, Rosin, Viziro Velis, Valkyrie, and I'm bringing in Steel Skull. And I'll go over why as the run evolves. But what I want to talk about really quick is Valkyrie's passive ability, Jealousy. It's a really interesting ability, and it makes for an amazing arena champion, actually. But in Clan Boss, it's really problematic. Every time this champion will, turn meter will be boosted by 10% every time an enemy champion places a buff. And what that means is that when the clan boss places that increased attack buff on themselves, Valkyrie's going to give herself a 10% turn meter boost. And if you've tried speed tuning Ninja in any normal team, you understand how impactful a little turn meter boost that happens periodically can really be on your team. And so speed tuning with that can be really tricky. Now, I have a video, I've done a couple of videos, I think, on my website, and I have a build already utilizing Valkyrie with everybody just going at a 1-1 ratio. That's not that hard. You make them fast enough where that turn meter boost she gets isn't enough to actually catch up or outspeed any of the other champions, and it keeps everything in sync. But when you start bringing in champions that are going on 4-3 ratios, and by that I'm talking about champions like Sepulchre Sentinel, who has that amazing block debuff ability and increased damage ability, or increased defense ability, which is so vital to staying affinity friendly and also making Valkyrie shields huge and staying alive. And same thing with someone like Steel Skull. We're actually bringing in 2 champions that have 4 turn cooldowns on their kit, and we need both of them to make sure that we have increased defense on our team for the entirety of the fight. That's going to help us build it at a lower defense level, help us stay alive longer. So they're very vital to the success of this comp. But because they're going at those 4-3 ratios, because they're going so fast, it's a lot harder to adjust for Valkyrie's passive turn meter boost. So it's really tricky. But thankfully now on the calculator, we do have the ability to deal with affinity, and that is massive. And so because of that, we're actually able to, I was actually able to, you know, tweak some things and figure out a good speed range so we can get Sepulchre Sentinel to be able to block our debuffs every AoE, as well as deal with the stun for at least a majority of our champions, right? And still enable us to have increased defense on all of our champions for the majority of the fight. Now, here's the thing. I could easily have built this for Ultra Nightmare only, and maybe even had a slightly different, slightly better tune, maybe slower speeds, or everything works just perfectly. But I never want to do a team just for Ultra Nightmare, because if you're doing 2 keys on Ultra Nightmare, you got 2 keys sitting around. You want to use them on Nightmare as well, right? So, of course, this team does work on both Ultra Nightmare and Nightmare for Void or for Affinity. Won't make a difference. So I'm really happy with this kind of a team, and I think that's why it's so special. What I'd like to do really quick before I show you the stats, which I think we're going to do at the end of this video, I want to show you how this looks in the calculator so you have an understanding of exactly what I'm talking about. So you can see the calculator here. I do have everybody input with their speeds over there on the side. We've got 240 speed for Steel Skull, 245 for Sepulcher, 185 for Vizier, 187, 88 for Rosin, and 171 for Valkyrie. Obviously, I have, sets when needed are included in this as well, but you can see how this works. We have Sepulcher Sentinel using that block debuff ability right between every AoE, allowing us to block any affinity debuffs that come along, and also allow those to stretch so they cover us for the stun. So when we get stunned, we're going to be not losing a turn basically on this. Now, the first couple turns, it doesn't block everybody, so we do need to make sure that Steel Skull, our other 4/3 champion, doesn't take the stun. Everybody else is going to be covered, which is fantastic. And you can see here on turn 9, we're finally fully in sync where Steel Skull takes a double turn, Sepulcher takes a double turn, and then everybody takes a single turn, allowing us to have counterattack for the majority of the fight, increase defense for everybody for pretty much the entirety of the fight, and stay affinity friendly. Now, of course, this is non-affinity. This is void that I'm showing you. So when we switch to affinity, you can see right here in the calculator, all I have to do, we can put in magic, force, spirit, whichever one. We can just go ahead and put in magic just to see how it looks. And you notice the turn order changed right there. That's because of Valkyrie's passive. It is in the calculator. And so you can see now, Steel Skull's taking that double turn after that second AoE, right? But Sepulcher's still in the same spot, blocking the debuffs from affinity and making sure that Steel Skull, or making sure that we're going to be able to block at least the majority of the stuns for everybody but Steel Skull on the squad. And so that's what's so great about this. It worked for Ultra Nightmare at these speeds, regardless of affinity. And yes, it does work on Spirit Affinity too. You'll notice there is going to be no change right here. No change to anything is because on Spirit it works just as well. We're blocking those debuffs, right? Now, here's the thing. We can take this and go to Nightmare as well. Same speeds. Now, if I do want to make this work perfectly as best as possible, I do need to change some of the delays, right? I want to make sure, because we all take a turn a little earlier, we want to make sure that we're doing a little bit different stuff with the delays, right? So that we can get the timing of everything just right. And so we do that. Now we have the timing right, and you can see Sepulcher Sentinel doesn't go last, but we'll still be able to block the debuffs here from the second AoE, and for the stun on 3 champions that go before him. So Rosin, Scaride, Vizier, and Sepulcher basically are 2 1-1 ratio DPS champions, and Sepulcher Sentinel will all have block debuff on. Now this is obviously going to be a little bit of an issue because of affinity, so that's something you definitely have to take into account when you're doing this. But we also have Steel Skull here placing that increased defense right before the stun, and the reason why we have it there is really important actually. What's happening is we're making sure that the clan boss isn't preferring one target over another because of the buffs on them, because the clan boss does love to avoid increased defense. Having Steel Skull place that right before the stun makes sure that we all have increased defense. Now, it does mean that Valkyrie and Sepulcher won't have increased defense for that first AoE, but they do have the massive shield from Valkyrie being freshly placed, and they're also 2 very defensive champions for us, so I think we're going to be able to survive that pretty well. Maybe not as, maybe it's not the most optimal of team, but you have to deal with what you have, and for this account, these are the champions that we have to use. You can also do this one on affinity as well, so I'll show you right here. We can go ahead and just do Spirit, and you can see we are still in sync. We have Sepulcher still blocking the debuffs. Everybody's covered except for Steel Skull for the stun, and we're good to go. So it's a pretty sweet team. I'm actually really happy with it. I think it's going to be really successful for us, and the best part is it can work for Ultra Nightmare or Nightmare. Obviously, if I really wanted to make sure this was affinity friendly, I'd want to have another green affinity champion in place of Rosin or Vizier, and that way Steel Skull isn't taking that stun. But other than that, it's going to be really, really effective, and it might even be fine just to let Steel Skull take the stun and see how long we can last. On Nightmare, we'll probably get 1 key anyway before people start dying. So that's the team, that's the build. Let's go look at the run. Okay, so let's jump in the run here, and you're gonna see I have it set up to mostly run on auto, but we do need to manual just a little bit here, especially on this first turn, because we need to extend both Steel Skull and Valkyrie's turns just a little bit here. So that's basically what we need to do, and so here we go. So we got Steel Skull here. We're gonna go ahead and add an A1 in there, and now we'll be fully in sync with her. And the only other thing we need to do is the same thing with Valkyrie, add an A1 right here so we get the counterattack at the right point, and then we should be in good shape right there. A1, perfect, there we go. And then I can click auto, and it should work beautifully. Now what's going to end up happening is Steel Skull is going to take a double turn before the first AoE, but she's going to place that increased defense ability right before the stun. That'll ensure that everybody has increased defense, and then the stun's going to be based more on our turn order and affinity rather than who has what buffs up. On the same token, right, we have Sepulchre Sentinel taking a double turn. You'll see right here between the AoEs, being able to go last and place that increased defense and block debuff ability. That'll help keep us affinity friendly by blocking the AoE debuff as well as the stun debuff. Now, the stun debuff blocking won't cover Steel Skull. It's the only champion that won't be covered in this, at least on Ultra Nightmare. You'll definitely want to check in the calculator and make sure that your champions that are getting targeted will have that ability up on them, right? This is why that Steel Skull is last in her turn order, right? And we have Valkyrie actually just ahead of her. And interestingly enough, I don't think Vizier might be covered on this, but there are points, I think, especially on Nightmare, where maybe Vizier won't be as covered as well, especially on Affinity when Valkyrie kind of goes a little bit ahead of Vizier in the turn order. So that's part of the adjustment that we just have to make, and keeping aware of that and making sure our stun target is a valid target. Now, this won't fully sync up until turn 9. Once you hit turn 9, that's when you're going to see Steel Skull actually taking that double turn before the first AoE, and everything should work out just fine. Now, an interesting note, in the past, Steel Skull's AI, that A2 ability of hers, this cleanse and heal, would work periodically. She would actually use it excessively. Now I just found out that she doesn't actually use it unless you force her to. So the cool thing about her using that increased defense ability, the A3, right before the stun, is the next skill that she'll use is that A2 cleanse, which will help our stun target, Sepulchre Sentinel in this case, help heal up, which I think is actually very vital, because Sepulchre otherwise will be going down a lot in HP. We don't have Sepulchre in lifesteal. We don't have Sepulchre with a lot of crit damage, so Sepulchre's natural healing is pretty low. So because of that, we actually do rely on Steel Skull to help keep our stun target alive. We're going to be relying on Valkyrie shields for most of this fight, but for the rest of it, we do need Steel Skull to help, especially our stun target, survive these hits. The other thing that you might notice if we die a little early is because the HP levels aren't super high. I did not glyph everything on this team, and we would like to bump those HP because that does increase our survivability, right? The defense is great, but we do need enough HP to be able to survive the AoE hits, and so that's going to be really important. Now, it's going to be less important on champions that have a lot of defense like Valkyrie, Sepulchre, and Rosin, but especially for Vizier, especially for Steel Skull, that is going to be vital to help offset the lack of defense there and keep everybody alive. So it's pretty good team. One of the things I would be looking for when I'm watching this, who dies first? How do we die? If we're not dying to an AoE, if we're dying to the stun, that tells me, hey, maybe I need to do something to help bump my stun target up. If we're dying to the AoEs, or it's just 1 or 2 champions, that tells me, hey, maybe I need to put them in stalwart gear or give them more HP or defense so they survive a little longer. Ideally, everybody wipes at the same time, so that we're kind of, because once one champion goes down, the whole thing falls apart. Only as strong as our weakest link, so to speak. So it's a pretty solid team. I like it a lot. Obviously Steel Skull, there's some RNG involved. Steel Skull doesn't land those poisons all the time. Vizier's not fully booked on the A1, so we're not extending the debuffs every time. Not to mention crit rate, the damage that we do, the passive from Sepulchre Sentinel, protecting our champions, all that's going to be a major factor and something we're going to want to take into account when we're going through this. But I really like this team. I think it works really nicely. It's a team very similar to one I used to run back in the day. So let's jump towards the end and see how it does. Not too bad. We got that 2 key. It's pretty close though, and I'm sure RNG is not going to be in our favor every single time. But you can see we had those heals from Steel Skull were pretty clutch when they were coming in, and overall this team was really nice. Now I thought it was really interesting that Vizier lasted as long as he did. We lasted till turn, I think it was 39 was when we died. On turn 33 is when Sepulchre Sentinel died, and the rest of the team was able to survive a little bit even after that. Obviously Valkyrie shields are a huge part of that, right? And it was interesting though, Vizier with the stalwart gear was able to survive even though he has about 1,500 less defense than Rosin does. I thought that was really interesting. So you know, you can see the power of certain sets when you use them. For a team like this, stalwart is extremely valuable. If we could put everybody in stalwart gear, we would survive a much longer time. Definitely something I would recommend for our team to going forward, especially for Sepulchre and Vizier, Steel Skull maybe, and Rosin. But you know, the thing about Rosin, Sepulchre, and Vizier, they all have pretty low HP as well, and that's going to be a major factor as far as surviving. Like I was saying, for those AoE specifically, Valkyrie and Steel Skull have, I think, about 40k each, and so it makes it a lot easier for them to survive past, you know, when everybody else does, past when the shield breaks, because they have some leeway there in their HP values themselves. So there's lots of ways we can go around to improve this team, improve the damage of it, right? Now, Steel Skull, obviously, 13 million, that's all due to the poisons. You can see wasn't doing any raw damage at all. Rosin, however, putting up really good numbers. You know, I've been able to build Vizier pretty damage heavy. You can build him with a lot of attack, crit damage, but I don't think anybody on this team has more than like 130 crit damage. So it's not even close to being optimized damage wise. I would love to have Rosin with 250 crit damage, Vizier with 200 crit damage, Sepulchre with 200 crit damage, and then I think you would see these numbers skyrocketing into the 40 and 50 million range, and I think that would be a really nice result. Stalwart gear helping us last longer would do just as much work for helping keep us alive and would be incredible as well. So there's definitely more than a few ways to go about building this type of a team and being really successful with it, but I really like this one. This is good. Let's look at the gear. So that was a pretty successful run. Let's go ahead and look at the champions and how I built them. We start with Sepulchre Sentinel. Fantastic champion, right? Having that block debuff ability. It is on a 4-turn cooldown, which is why we did this comp in the first place. 245 speed, 250 accuracy in order to land that decreased attack ability. I do have 100% crit rate on Sepulchre as well. Now, big thing, Sepulchre is a defensive champion, so the more defense, the better. She does have pretty low base HP, and so I don't generally try to bump it up too much, because if she's a stun target, less HP means less damage from the clan boss, so that's usually a good thing, actually. The accuracy is important for that decreased attack, although we do have Vizier, so we could probably very easily get away with a lot less attack or a lot less accuracy on all of our champions. We really only need those debuffs to land once, and then Vizier should be able to keep them up. Now, obviously, I like to build a lot of damage on Sepulchre Sentinel. We didn't have that kind of gear in here, so, you know, no real crit damage to speak of, but we did try to get 100% crit rate because Sepulchre can slap. The next champion is going to be Rosin Scarhide, amazing damage dealer for clan boss. Now, again, we don't have the gear on this account to really pump up the damage numbers, because my Rosin, you know, could do 60k a hit on that A1 ability, even more oftentimes, and so you can get a lot of really good damage out of Rosin. In this case, we can't really do that. He's still doing good numbers for us though, but we got the accuracy to land that decreased defense, and we can, again, you can probably get away without it because of Vizier, or at least not quite as much, but it's always better just to make sure you can land it. We do have that 100% crit rate, 188 speed. Now, I have them going fastest in my team. You need somebody in that 187 to 189 speed range, so that's where Rosin falls here. And obviously defensive based champion, so a lot of defense on him. And you'll also notice that with most of these champions like Sepulchre, like Rosin, we're using a lot of perception sets. I don't always have accuracy or banners on these champions because we just didn't have them on the account, and speed was going to be the more important issue. Using perception sets can be a huge boon to getting the accuracy numbers you need. You're not really sacrificing stats, as it gives you some speed, and usually the pieces are pretty good because you're forging them, and you're getting a whole bunch of extra accuracy, which can really fill in a lot of the gaps on your team. The next champion is Vizier Ovelis. Vizier is an amazing debuff extender, will make any team a lot better. That's why we brought him in, especially with someone like Steel Skull who's not very consistent with the poisons. He makes this team, easily makes this a 2-key team. He may not be the top end type of champion, right? Once you can land your debuffs successfully and consistently, you don't need someone like Vizier, but if that's not the case, he's outstanding for your account. Now, I have him at 185 speed, and you do need one champion going at about 185 speed, because basically when we hit affinity, you want someone going going slightly slower than Valkyrie with that turn meter boost, and so that's going to be that 185 speed. That's what we're looking for right there. Try to max out his crit rate, get him some crit damage, good accuracy, the usual stuff. Obviously, if we build more attack on him, he can do more damage, but his primary role here is just to extend those debuffs, and that's what we're doing. Next, of course, is the queen of this team. We're talking about Valkyrie, an absolute outstanding champion, one of the best in this game, with a massive shield, counter attack, all that stuff. I try to get her defense as high as possible, so we got almost 6,700 defense, which I think is an excellent result. Did put 100% crit rate on her. She can do a little bit of damage. She's not a major damage dealer, so if you skip the crit rate, I don't think that's a problem. Her big role is keeping everybody alive, so I always say focus on the defense, and that's all you really need to focus on. Get the defense up and make the right speeds. Not a lot of HP, but we did get the speed we needed. We got the defense we needed, and those shields are what's going to keep us alive. And then very last, we have Steel Skull, 3,300 defense, 240 speed. The speed is the key. You'll notice there's no crit rate, no crit damage. He doesn't deal any damage at all, so not really worth building out. We do have a good accuracy though, and that is going to be key. Now, I'm always going to be aiming with these teams to get about 3,000 defense on them. When you have increased defense on your champions for the entirety of the fight, 3,000 defense is basically the equivalent of having 4,800 defense on your champions. So with people like Valkyrie, with people like Sepulchre Sentinel, I don't really need them to have increased defense for the entirety of the fight. Their defense is already extremely high, but it helps, right? They're damage dealers on that end of things. But as far as survival, you don't necessarily need it. But for champions like Vizier, for Steel Skull, it's going to be really vital to make sure that you have that 3,000 defense threshold. Now, you might have noticed Vizier is actually considerably lower than that, about 2,700 defense, but we had him in a Stalwart set, and Stalwart is so good at mitigating damage, it really counteracts the lack of defense on his kit and makes his build much better. So that's why we can run him at a lot lower defensive numbers. If I could put everybody in Stalwart, I would, but obviously we didn't have that kind of opportunity on this account here. So that's the team. I mean, I was really happy with the result, being able to 2-key Ultra Nightmare, being able to 1-key Nightmare, which I'm sure this is going to be able to do, and on Affinity. Affinity is not always going to help us, right? This might be more of a 3-key team on average, but the fact that we hit 2-key tells us we got good potential. I did actually 38 million on a previous run. I also did about 32 million on a previous run, so there's going to be a little leeway with the results here, but there's clearly room to improve this. I haven't really glyphed anything, and we could always get better gear along the way as well. And then Stalwart set would be amazing. So I'm really happy with this. I know that Gaff is going to be as well. And of course, if you guys would like account work, don't forget you can hit me up on my website. I offer a lot of different kind of account work. If that's something you'd like to do, me and my team are happy to help. And of course, don't forget to subscribe, hit that notification bell. Until next we meet, guys, I'm the Deadwood Jedi.